Hi everyone, today's video is going to be about solving linear equations, so hopefully just review for us. A couple things, so if you get an identity, which just basically means the left side equals the right side, so for example, if I have 3x plus 15 equals 3x plus 15, notice that they equal the same thing, or like if I subtracted everything out, I would get 0 equals 0. That means that the answer is going to be all real numbers. Okay, that's the symbol for all real numbers. Remember that this identity only happens when the left side is exactly the same as the right side. Okay. A conditional, what we like to think of as a normal equation, is just basically when we get one solution. So we divide by 3 and x equals 7. Okay. And then the last one is called a contradiction, which just basically means that no solution can make an equivalent statement. So notice, like, if I subtracted x from both sides, I get 0 to equal negative 21, which is false. Okay, so if all your variables cancel and the statement is false, then the answer is no solutions. So don't get no solution happy on me though, meaning like we want to know if you can solve problems, not give you a bunch of problems that don't have solutions. Okay, so let's take a look at some of the examples. So if we take a look at the first one, okay, when you're working on the same side of the equal sign, remember that you keep the operation. So this is 2x minus 4, and then this is 2x minus 4. Notice that the left side is exactly the same as the right side, so 0 equals 0 if you want to write that. Otherwise, the answer is all real numbers. Okay, let's do number 3, and then we'll go over to 2 and 4. So for number 3, when you work on the same side of the equal sign, you keep the operation. When you move across the equal sign, you do the inverse operation, so you get negative 3x to equal 0. And a lot of times people will say that this is no solutions, but you have a solution. Your variables didn't cancel out. If I divide this by negative 3, x equals 0. 0 is a real number. It exists on the number line, so it can be a solution. Okay. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at number 2. So when you go across the equal sign, you have to do the inverse operation. So we get x minus 10 equals 25. And then we add 10 to both sides. And we get x to equal 35. Okay. Remember that you can always plug your answer back in to make sure that it is correct. So you get one side equaling the other side. Okay, for the last problem, when you combine like terms, which means you're working on the same side of the equal sign, then you keep the operation. Then if we subtract 7x, notice that my variables all cancel and I get a false statement. So this is no solutions. Okay. All right, the last 4 problems, there's little ways we can maneuver these problems to make them a little less complicated for ourselves. So let's go ahead and take a look at example 1. Remember that to solve linear equations, you need to distribute. So distribute the 6 through to everything. So I get 18x minus 6. And then a very common mistake here is that people like to distribute the 8, or they do 8 minus 1 and distribute a 7. Remember that in the order of operations, multiplication comes first. So there's a negative 1 here that needs to be distributed first. Only the negative 1. Okay, only what's directly touching the parentheses. So 8 minus 10x plus 14. Okay. Combine like terms on the same side of the equal sign. And then when you go across the equal sign, do the inverse operation. So we get 28x minus 6 equals 22. Add the 6 to both sides. And then divide to get x alone. So we get x equal 1. Again, you can check your answers at the very end. So big key on this problem, was just make sure you distribute what is right next to the parentheses. Don't combine these first, and don't distribute the 8. Okay, next example. So you very well could do fractions throughout this entire problem, or we can have a little trick up our sleeve and look at all the denominators and find the least common denominator, okay, or the multiple that they share in common. So in this case, it's going to be 6. So I'm going to multiply everything by 6, the entire equation by 6. Now you don't have to write it out like this, but I'm going to just so that you can see where everything comes from. So 5 over 6x times 6 minus 2x times 6 plus 1/3 times 6 equals 2/3 times 6. Make sure that you multiply everything on both the left and the right side of the equal sign by 6. So you're going to see that this cancels out, and you're left with the 5x minus 12x. This is going to cancel out to 1 times 2, so plus 2. And then this is going to cancel out to 2 times 2, which is 4. Okay. Now you're going to see that we don't have any fractions to work with anymore. So we're going to combine like terms. That gives me negative 7x plus 2 equals 4. Okay. Subtract the 2 from both sides, so we get negative 7x to equal 2. Divide by negative 7, x equals negative 2/7. So again, you don't have to multiply, you don't have to multiply by the LCD, but I know how much we love fractions, and this is one way to get rid of fractions so that we don't have to work with them. And then again, I was just showing all of my steps here, but you really could just have done this up top and just said, okay, times 6, times 6, times 6, times 6, and gone from there. Okay. And then we can apply that same concept to decimals. So if we don't want to work in decimals, we can multiply the entire equation by 10 in order to get rid of the decimals. Okay. Now just be careful that you only multiply the coefficients by 10. You don't want to multiply the parentheses by 10 because you already did that here. So I'm going to multiply this by 10. We'll do an x sign, so times 10, times 10, times 10. Just make sure you multiply the entire equation by 10. So 3 times x plus 2 minus 5 times x plus 2 equals negative 2 minus 4. Okay. All right, let's go ahead and distribute everything through. Make sure you distribute the negative through to everything. So, and then when you combine like terms on the same side of the equal sign, keep the operation. When you go across the equal sign, do the inverse operation. So negative 2x equals negative 2. Divide by negative 2, x equals 1. So again, you don't have to multiply by 10, just like you don't have to multiply by the least common denominator in 6. But then we don't have to work with decimals or fractions. Okay, last example, same thing. I'm going to multiply by the LCD so that I don't have to worry about fractions. So the least common denominator in this case is 12. So I'm going to multiply each term by 12. So this first one is going to give me 6 times x plus 1. How did I get 6? Well, 12 over 2 is 6. Then 12 over 3 is 4. So my next one is going to be plus 4 times x minus 8. Make sure you keep things in parentheses, if there's parentheses there. Then I have 12 over 4, which is going to give me 3. So minus 3 times 2x. And then on the right-hand side, I don't have any I don't have anything in the denominator besides 1, so I'm going to multiply everything by 12. And then from here, just distribute everything through. And when you work on the same side of the equal sign, keep the operation. So that's just going to give me 4x minus 26 equals 48. Add 26 to both sides. So I get 4x to equal 74 and divide by 4. Reduce your fraction and you should get 37 over 2. Okay, remember that fractions are okay. And technically you could have, done this with fractions, but it's a lot simpler if you just multiply by the least common denominator. Okay, thanks for tuning in, and I will see you in class.